Well, hey, thanks for joining us for another episode of Triple Play. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And I promise you, I've had a couple episodes now without Scott, but he will be back. He got to head to the mountains to do a little skiing with his son, so I'm hoping he's having a great time. But that said, don't forget to check out our sponsors. The main one that we really enjoy is Brookes Bible College here in the Midwest. If you don't know about Brookes Bible College, you should. Okay, you can go to Brookes. That is with an E-B. Rookes, Brookes.edu. Check them out. They're a great place to get a cheap biblical education, and it's accredited. So, average, I don't know if you know this, but the average church in America is between 75 and 100 people. Can you imagine?
More than I thought.
Yeah, and if you came out of a normal Bible college today, you're coming out with, let's say you go to liberal arts Bible college, you're going to come out with 50 to 100 grand worth of debt.
I'm a Bible college graduate. That's accurate.
There you go. Yeah. So if you come out with close to 100 grand worth of debt, how are you going to pastor a church of 75 to 100? You're either going to be working a second job and a third job, or you better have a very wealthy congregation. So that said, check out Brookes because their goal is to give you a great biblical education at a very affordable cost. So you don't have to carry all that weight. Especially also people going to missions. If you're going to mission, you're going to be a missionary. Can't come out with the kind of debt. The other thing I would say too about Brookes Bible College, not to get on a little tangent about them, but I could talk about them all day because I'm really a big fan of theirs. But they were actually designed for lay people to get a better education. So if you're a lay person wanting to get a better grasp of biblical knowledge and understanding God's word beyond your Sunday morning sermon and beyond maybe YouTube, some more hands-on, some more in-depth training, give them a call. Brookes Bible College, can't recommend them enough. For those who have been longtime listeners, Marty from the Midwest Messianic Center, who's been on here several times, recently doing the Hanukkah, is a graduate of Brookes Bible College. So we don't just love them, but we've had people from there on here. And so that said, we are excited about our guest today. Today we got Lindi. Lindi, is that say it right?
Yeah.
Okay, Lindi. Okay, Lindi Williford. That's it right?
That's right.
Okay. Oh, I always.
No, great.
I chopped up. Yeah, well, I chopped up our last guest, his last name, because it was a very. It's funny because he's Chinese, but his adopted dad was Italian, so it's Master Leonardo.
Oh wow. Well, that would be kind of easy to mess up.
But today we got you, Lindi. Much easier. So I'm grateful that you're here today. It's going to be a fun time.
Thanks for having me.
I was sharing earlier. So Jay Moore says I gotta have you on here. I mentioned you.
Jay. I love Jay.
Yep, Jay. Thanks for all you do, buddy. And and he's actually been on here. And so then I mentioned to my wife, and my wife's like, "Oh my goodness, yeah, she's great. She's on all the," because my wife is a big on a lot of the parent sites here locally in the St. Louis area too. She is. We both were, what's the word, politically involved to some degree. Mm-hmm. I would say both of our levels during COVID jumped up.
Oh, yeah.
Spiked. So I'm interested to hear your story because I'm guessing based on what we've kind of had this quick conversation before we started kind of having this podcast that's a little bit of your story. So tell me a little bit about where you came from, where you grew up, what Bible college you went to.
Yeah.
How about that? And a little bit about your testimony.
Yeah. So I grew up in Warrenton, Missouri. I don't know if you know where that is. It was a little podunk town.
First Baptist Warrenton is a good friend of mine as the pastor right now.
Awesome.
So anybody looking for a good church, go check out
That's awesome.
Jason's church over at First Baptist Warrenton. Give him a little plug in here.
That's great.
Go ahead.
No, grew up in the church really. Was baptized when I was 13. God has really protected me through a lot of stuff in my life. And my testimony, like in this particular work that I'm in now, is I've been in insurance as a career for 20, 25 plus years. I was working as a risk management consultant claims person for the Missouri United School Insurance Council, which is like the risk pool for all the public schools in the state of Missouri. So I did that for probably 5-6 years, and then, COVID hit. And then my kids were affected because they were in public school, right? And they were masking our kids, and like parents were getting really mad. There was the quarantines. My daughter was quarantined like 4 times. You start.
So rewind here.
Yeah.
So what school did they go to? What school district?
They're in Wentzville School District.
Wentzville School District. Okay.
Yeah. So, when COVID happened and they started masking our kids, I just went straight feral mom, right? I was like, do not put a mask on my kids, stop quarantining them. My oldest daughter, she's in the Army now, so I'll give a little plug. I'm a proud Army mom. She's in basic training right now.
Awesome.
Yeah, so they quarantined her like 4 times. She was a wrestler, right? And she missed out on districts, and like she missed out on her 16th birthday. You know, like she couldn't take her driver's test. And so like it really affected her mentally. And it was a real big effect on my family. And so I said, yeah, I'm not putting up with this. And I started like organizing protests in my community for like in front of the health department saying, take these masks off our kids' public school. And my employer came to me and they're like, you can't be this vocal against public school because you're working for public schools. And I said, well, these are my kids. Like I have to be able to speak out and say, this is wrong. You know, I was talking in front of the Missouri Senate, the House. I was, you know, going to Jefferson City trying to get things changed for my kids. And they're like, this is a conflict. You can't do this. You can't do this. So I did have to make that decision of, you know, do I keep doing this or do I, you know, change? They were a client. I was on their client base, and my employer came to me and they're like, you can't do this anymore. We're going to have to move you off this client. And I had to make the decision, you know, my family is way more important than my job, but it was a wonderful job, paid well. I had a company car, all these things. And I look back on it and I think, you know, God totally had me there for the work that I'm doing now, right? Like, because I know so much about what happens inside public school now that I can use it for good instead of, you know, evil like they're doing right now. So I had to make the decision and I said, you know, you're just going to have to just take your job and shove it because I am not going to stop advocating for my kids. And so from that moment on, I think that was in July of 2021, I quit that job and I said, you know, God is like, I need you to go the other way and I need you to advocate for these kids. And it was just kind of like, boom, I was in it. I was in it to fight for our kids. I was in it to expose public school, you know, and that's just kind of like where the Lord has led me in this work is you have all of this background. You've seen the inside of the cesspool that is public education. And now you need to fix it and you need to expose it and you need to like try to get as many kids out as you can. And my kids unfortunately are stuck in public school because of a custody situation. So I can't pull them. So it's even more of a drive for me to make sure that it's fixed, and that things are exposed in public school. I would love to see parents just keep pulling their kids. You know, the homeschool community has exploded because parents are tired of it.
So I want to rewind. I love everything you're saying. I'm on board. Yeah. So I want to rewind and kind of go through this a little bit from what you said. So I want to start with your daughter. So first of all, you said the masking.
Yeah.
What was your first clue that masking was an issue with your daughter? Was it just the fact that you immediately just knew this wasn't a good solution, or were you looking at the science out there, or was it a combination, or was it just like, you know, I'm just not into all this?
Well, I mean, like at the beginning, right? I think everybody was a little fearful. Like this was something new that we had never been through before as a society, like our generation I'm referring to. And at first I was like, okay, well, I guess we'll wear the masks and like maybe they do help. And then it just was like, I felt like my county, I'm in St. Charles County, was really picking on kids in school with the quarantines. Like the rest of the community, like wasn't getting quarantined as much as our kids in public school.
So quarantine meaning like if there was an outbreak, they had to stay home.
Yeah.
And back then it was what, 14 days?
14 days. And I mean, like they couldn't do anything. And like you would get this nasty gram from the health department. Like it looked all official, right? Like you're quarantined for 14 days. You can't go anywhere. You can't do anything. School wouldn't let you come, you know, and like my daughter missed out on districts for wrestling. And I mean, crucial, like important childhood memories. And they're like, yeah, nope, sorry. You were exposed to some virus and now you have to stop your life for 2 weeks. So that happened repeatedly to my kids. And even after the first time, I was like, this is weird. And you know how your spirit is just kind of like, this is not right. This is not normal. And so like, I think COVID was March 2020. Like I kind of was like, okay on the masks until like they called off school. And then when school started back up in that following fall and they were still pulling this crap and like saying they were in quarantine, I was like, this is not normal. This is not right.
So by the fall, you were not on board.
August 2020.
So I'm gonna give you my story real quick.
Yeah.
2 weeks into, I was done. I knew all the information I needed.
Yeah.
I looked around. Nobody was dying, right? I had it.
Right.
I actually had COVID before we actually knew what it was.
I've never tested ever, so I've probably had it, but
I haven't tested either.
Yeah.
The only reason why I know is I gave blood when they were taking the monoclonal antibodies. I would give blood that summer. Like 3 months later, they were trying to find people to give the antibodies for the first generation. And so I went and gave blood. I never got tested, but they found the antibodies in me, which confirmed what I pretty much knew, because I had all the classic symptoms. Right. The other funny part about my story is I was in the middle of the woods when the shutdown happened and had no idea.
Oh, really? That's kind of cool. That's kind of like a movie, right?
I came back and was going to work and thought that like I thought like the apocalypse had happened. I mean, it was so spooky driving down Manchester. Nothing's open. I called my wife. I'm like, there's nothing open on the street. I'm like, not even Schnucks, and it's like 9 o'clock. Something is weird.
I mean, doesn't that seem like a whole lifetime ago living through that? Like they really shut everything down. Churches, you couldn't go to funerals, you couldn't sit by your dying loved one. I mean, like, we really let that happen.
Well, fear does a lot of things.
And I know it's fear. I mean, I know that now, but like, I just can't believe that was actually our lives for.
Well, I think fear was the first part, and then I think indoctrination kicked in the second part, right? Like you saw party / indoctrination start to happen. So I think part of it too. Was, you know, and you're right. The first couple of weeks, I was the same way. Like, I'm not sure what's going on. Yeah. Okay, I wasn't wearing a mask necessarily, but I was trying to comply. Mm-hmm. And it was just a bizarre time. But 15 days in, I saw what was going on, and then I also started seeing responses. Mm-hmm. One of them, which was great because I saw Elon just recently talk about it, was Elon Musk was like, why are we putting people on respirators?
Yeah.
Out on Twitter?
Yeah. He
goes, this makes no sense. And they're like, why are you commenting on this? You're not a doctor. And he goes, no, but I do create life support systems on spaceships, right? Like I might know a thing or two about oxygen and how it flows. And so, you know, it was stuff like that where I'm going, wait a second here. Elon Musk is a pretty smart cat. Yeah. He has a lot of inside information. Mm-hmm. Why would he, you know, and obviously he's right. He knows about life support systems. Mm-hmm. So, you know, all these people are dying. Maybe he knows something. And so that was the kind of stuff. And then when they started shutting down like the hydroxychloroquine and then the ivermectin. Yeah. You know, today, even trying to get ivermectin is almost this controversial thing. You know, people still think of it as a horse dewormer, right? Yeah. And it's so crazy to me that that they do that. I'm not fully understanding as to why they feel the need to put it down. What they don't talk about is that it's probably one of the top 5 medications that we've ever gotten. Yeah, that's right there with penicillin.
Like, didn't it win like a Nobel Prize or something?
And not only that, but they continue to find. So it was initially done as a malaria pill. Yeah. But they have continued to find multiple deworming. Yeah. Okay. The most recent studies are showing that it has anti-cancer possibility. So
I have a stash at home just in case.
That's good. I haven't
used it, but just in case.
I have.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Did it work? For the purposes
on anything. Yeah. So what I have found, I'll give you my secret. Obviously, exercise, diet, all the normal things you should be doing to get your body in peak condition. And I exercise almost every night. I try to eat fairly healthy as much as I can, and build healthy things around me. So I find that, you know, if you put a bunch of M&Ms by you, you're going to eat them. So, but if you put like something that's maybe, you still want a snack, but maybe something healthy, a healthy choice that fills you up better and gives you more. So my go-tos are Kodiak cakes, if you're familiar with that brand. They make these, they're called Bear Bites. They're like a graham cracker.
Nice.
And they're whole grain and they have protein in them. And the thing is, a serving size is like 12, and I get about 2 to 4 of those things in me, and I'm usually fairly full. Really? I can't eat. 12 would... I feel, and I can eat usually, but they're very dense. So that said, that's one of my go-to snacks. But again, you know, it's interesting how the reaction was. So now you're getting into, you're being activated. The next thing you kind of said was your job. So you got this job thing going on. That, I imagine that conversation. It was probably, I guess, stressful for you, but I'm guessing the conversation with your husband was probably an interesting conversation. Was he supportive in your decision to kind of keep going?
Absolutely. 100% supportive. Still to this day, supportive of all of the stuff that I do. And I really would not have been able to do it without him. But we both just knew, like, it's time to go. Like, this is not where you're supposed to be right now. And then it just kind of morphed into the advocacy and this education reform and, really kids. Mostly kids, like there was a bill yesterday the Missouri House heard about, social services being able to take children and like after the third time they take them, they put them up for adoption. It was just complete nonsense. And it's like, I feel like the kids and family are so under attack right now that I have to stick up for kids in any possible way that I can. And that's when I really got loud, was when my county kept quarantining kids over and over and over again. And St. Charles County, and I know St. Louis County was doing the same thing, 29,000 kids one year. They quarantined 29,000 kids. Like, you tell me, how many days of school is that missed? That's hundreds of thousands of days of school missed for these kids.
Well, you said a lot of things that were involved in it. My own daughter didn't get her driver's license until she was 18. Yeah. I had one that was in that same age. She's year one in college this year. So
sports scholarships.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of things, just even interaction. Mm-hmm. And so even for like my daughter, I asked for a medical exception for her because she started having breathing and heart issues.
Right. I was having headaches.
So my daughter started having these breathing and heart issues. Mm-hmm. They wound up being able to, a year later, do a minor surgery, and it seems to have fixed it. But we didn't know.
Yeah.
And I gave him a letter from a heart specialist, a breathing specialist, her general, all of them saying she should not wear a mask for any long-term being more than maybe 30 minutes or whatever. And they all were like, well, then she can, the answer in the school district that we were in was we can put her in special ed. I was like, what?
That's ridiculous.
My daughter's not special ed.
Yeah.
She's a normal kid.
Right.
She has no learning disability. That is, and then they had all these rules that she would have to follow. And I'm like, so we actually wound up during that time pulling for about a year all of our kids at home.
Good.
We did homeschooling for about a year before we returned them. And then my oldest never went back to high school. She wound up doing the online school through the state.
Yeah.
For the next, so this is her first year going back to college. It's the first time she's been going back to classes with people. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
that's awesome.
And you talked about the homeschool community. What we did since she was doing the online stuff with the state, we wound up reaching out to the homeschool community and explaining the situation. Like, well, she can come to our homecoming and they do all that stuff.
Yeah, they do. It's different than when we were growing up. Like, I don't know how old you are. I'm 44, but
I'm a little older.
Homeschooling back then was not the same. There's huge communities of homeschoolers with, like you said, dances and events and sports and all kinds of stuff. And in St. Charles County, the community out there is ginormous.
Absolutely.
And it's just, it makes me so happy to see how many families have made that choice. And I have not heard from one family that has regret that decision.
I 100% agree. But the only thing I worry about that is I tell them, make sure you still stay engaged in the public censor.
Yeah.
Because the idea is I get that we have to take our kids out to protect them, but we need to make it better also for the next generation. You kind of get this. So I talk to people all the time. They'll be like, I don't want to vote in school board election because I don't have kids in it. And I'm like, yeah, but you pay for it.
Yeah.
Okay. So
they're generating the next employees that you're going to be in your community or the next leaders of your community.
Yeah. I was like, these people are making decisions. I actually literally had this conversation with the guy at the gym last night. He was bragging to me that he had never registered it, and he's 40 years old, never registered to vote. And I said, you're bragging to me about giving up that? I said, then you get everything you deserve. If they tax you 50% or 100%, if you don't at least exercise your minimum right to vote, I don't know what to tell you about it. And it was funny. He kind of took it back and I said, I love you. You're a friend of mine. But I'm just saying, I think that you came to me like that was a bragging point because you don't have to get involved in parties. And I get
how many people you think were not voters before COVID and are now like, I will never miss an election ever again. Well,
I know that activated a bunch, but on the other hand, there's still a bunch that aren't. I'll give you a thing that I just read by, do you know who Scott Pressler is? Mm-mm. So Scott Pressler goes around the country getting people registered to vote.
Oh, awesome.
Okay. Been probably the largest conservative, and one of his favorite things to do is find counties that can be flipped. So he'll find a voting county and he'll find out that there's actually more Republicans than Democrats in there. But the reason why the Democrats keep winning is that the Republicans aren't registered, and he'll go door to door, event to event.
God, what's that effort? That's hard.
Absolutely. He's probably registered more voters over the last 8 years than any organization or person. And I say organizations too, like literally swaths. And the other thing that's cool about him is he also organized cleanups.
Nice.
So a lot of times after elections, you got all that stuff around. People throw stuff, trash, all the signs. They go up, he organized groups, they go around and clean all the areas.
Nice.
And he's even done some inner cities where they've gotten real bad to organize public cleanup. So Scott Presler, if you're listening in, giving you a little shout out, buddy. But great guy all over the United States. He's been up in New Hampshire lately registering voters, and I think he's in Carolina, but rightfully so. That said, we were going down. He recently put out a thing. He's been up in Minnesota, and he put out almost 50% of all hunters in Minnesota are not registered voters.
Wow.
Of age hunters are not registered voters. And he said, so he goes, that's how many, most of those people are going to be conservative. They're 2A, so not all of them, but a vast majority of them. And he said, so that just tells you how few in Minnesota are registered.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what happens sometimes is conservatives get in the outlining counties, and they're like, well, our area isn't affected by, you're just like when you go to outliner areas of Missouri. Mm-hmm. I would tell them what's going on with these St. Louis school districts, and they'd be like, but our schools aren't dealing with it. I'm like, yeah, but if you don't help out, they will.
And like I'm seeing in St. Charles County, just kind of like the migration from St. Louis, like they're trying to infiltrate, our schools first. I feel like St. Charles County is really trying to hold the line on conservative things. And, Missouri is such a weird, like we've got the rural counties, we've got the suburban counties, and you've got the urban counties. So like it's such a different demographic all over our state, especially in education, that it's kind of hard to put like a one size fits all ed reform on the schools, public schools in Missouri, because it's just so different. But I feel like there are a lot of counties like St. Charles County right now that are really trying hard to fight back at what they're trying to do. Like I see and it's starting in our schools. Like there's no more local politics, no more local than the school board.
Absolutely.
I mean, like that's where it starts. So if I talk to parents all the time. I said, just go to a school board meeting. Yes, it's boring, and you probably won't understand half of what's going on, but like this is where it starts. This is where the infiltration starts with the liberal ideas and things like that, I feel, because they're trying to get at our kids. So I've seen how even at our county level, some of our councilmen, like they want us to be St. Louis County. And I know there's a lot of conservative areas of St. Louis County, but we don't want to be St. Louis County and St. Charles County. We want to be, we're really conservative out there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I see is nobody wants to live in the cities.
Yeah.
So they push out.
Yeah.
And they start to bring those values with them, but they don't understand that those are the values that they should be leaving.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I always tell my liberal friends, name me a Democrat-ran city that you want to live in.
I mean,
that's great.
That's right.
That you feel safe in.
Chicago, St. Louis, Portland. I mean, look at them.
Yeah.
They're disasters. Violence is through the roof.
And I said, even if you disagree with Republicans, go look at Republican-ran cities and tell me, was New York not better underneath Giuliani?
Right.
Was it not better underneath Bloomberg? Mm-hmm. Compared to what it is now or before?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like, there was almost like a 14-year period where New York was considered one of the safest, greatest places in the United States. And now, I have family that are like, man, I just went to, if you're going to stay in New York, you better not stay in downtown Manhattan. There's drugs infested people and feces everywhere.
Thinking about St. Louis now,
Oh.
like don't be there after dark.
I remember driving last year to see my daughter sing at Busch Stadium, and I hadn't been in a little while, which is funny because I had season tickets, but it just tells you, like, I don't feel safe going down there, right?
I haven't been to a game in a long time, and I used to love going to games.
And so I go down there to see my daughter sing, and I'm like, it's Sunday, 1:00, and I'm looking over, and there's parks full of just...
Right.
And these were parks that, when I was involved in Christian Family Day, that were completely clean and great, and we would bring thousands of inner city kids.
Yeah.
Let them have the time of their life and then walk them over to the ballpark.
Yeah.
And now they're filled with, I could never bring kids there. They're filled with drug infested people all over the place, half dressed. I mean, it was just, so yeah, I mean, pity and apathy will breed
apathy. Yeah. I mean, I'm guilty. I was apathetic in politics for a long time. My civic duty to me wasn't important because everything was fine. And now, they mess with our kids, and it was a wake up call for me, big time.
Gotcha. Well, I think it's been and I agree with you. I think it's been a wake up call to a lot of parents. Obviously, you mentioned the homeschool community has expanded. I've heard that the Missouri homeschool community has expanded by a third.
That's awesome.
And so that very well could be.
Yeah. I think that's the answer, is to just crash the system, pull your kids out.
Well, I see it as a twofold. As you said, not everybody can pull them out.
Yeah.
So pull them out when you can.
Yeah. I'm trying to reform it. My kids are still in it, so I'm trying to fix it.
But I believe we can.
Yeah.
And I think there's still a lot of good teachers. I think there are people who have gone to public education, been indoctrinated, but haven't bought in. I think that, the farther you're away from what I find is those that go to college, get a degree, and then don't continue on that education path, tend to actually be better teachers than those that are constantly in that education path, because they're constantly continuing to get that indoctrination.
It's a cycle, right? Like you go into K through 12, then you go to universities, and then it's just kind of,
And in a lot of people in education, what you find is education becomes almost a god to them.
Oh, yeah.
And so, they've got this, they got that.
I call it the establishment. I've called it the cartel before, too, the education cartel, just because I do feel like public education now is more an employment center for administrators and teachers than it is about the kids. They've got the best retirement like I've never heard of. Nobody has a retirement like a teacher or administrator. It's insane.
But 20 years ago, we were told they were the underprivileged and underserved in the community, and it was better to get a non-government job. But now, underneath today's world, it's better to have a government-supported job, right? I mean,
and I'm not knocking teachers. There are really good teachers, like you said. Not all of them are NEA union teachers that are set on indoctrinating your kid. But I think the focus of the education establishment is completely misplaced right now.
But I actually think that happened with the universities. The universities have expanded. They're cartels.
Yeah.
Okay. You talk about
that's another podcast.
They literally get state funding.
Yeah.
And then they get all this money in.
Yeah.
Okay. They're not paying their college kids tons of money to play football and this stuff, and yet they're packing out these stadiums that are the size of pro stadiums.
Yeah.
And selling hot dogs and beers and all that stuff too, right? I mean, so you just go and you look at that and you just step back and you go, this is, and then all these people come out with debt on top of it. On top of them making all this money, then all these kids also have this debt. I'm like, public education the universities need to be redone. Yeah. We're seeing a lot of that starting to fight back recently. What are your thoughts? I was going to ask you about that. I know you're obviously more local, but you obviously, I'm assuming you have had to pay attention to people like Bill Ackerman speaking out about these universities. Do you know who he is?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I do try to stick through K through 12 and I'm more local, but I do think you're right. It's just the cycle of like they're teaching teachers to teach things that are just completely woke and out there, like the social emotional learning stuff that is just crammed on our kids' throats now. It's just the universities are making that part of their teaching of teachers, and it's just.
Well, you get to start with Ben Shapiro did a great episode several months back that was dealing with college education, just starting with enrollment. I think he used Harvard because that's where he's from. I think it was Harvard at the time, and he showed that the entry level scores and an African American entry level score was almost half of what the average Asian entry level score. Mm-hmm. And the average African American score getting into Harvard wouldn't have made it into a normal university 10 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now they're going to Harvard on full rides, So, and so he was just showing, and then he showed like how they take less Asians because they want to be proportionate.
Oh yeah, right.
So and Asians get in there more. So they take a lot less Asians.
Yeah.
And then like Hispanics are less than African Americans because they make better scores. And so it was interesting how when you just look at enrollment and average test scores, and you watch that, they're teaching DEI coming into the system.
Exactly.
You've got, if you're an Asian, you've got to score a lot higher than your African-American counterpart.
Yeah.
Pretty much higher than your...
I mean, you're not suggesting that we're basing things off the color of people's skin, right? Like they're always saying like the merits instead of the color of their skin, you know? Like, I mean, like... Could there be something any more racist than that? I mean,
I agree.
It's terrible.
If we flip the script,
flip it, and like, what are you doing?
And you know, they would be absolutely yelling, "Racist! You racist!" The other thing I always find is they always yell at white, and I'm like, who is a true white person?
Yeah, I don't know.
Everybody I know is a mutt. They have all sorts of backgrounds. They probably got a little American Indian. They probably have a little, Irish in them or Scottish, and all these were oppressed people at one point. Okay. You're making big judgments on the color of your skin.
Yeah.
And not
of the content of somebody's character or their, the merit of them working hard and getting good grades. And it's crazy. It's so crazy.
So we're not totally off from age. You're in your mid 40s. I'm almost 50. So I'm going to ask you this. Do you feel like prior to Obama that racial tensions were better than today or after?
Better.
Yeah.
Way better.
I've yet to find almost anybody that I know of that says racial tensions.
I mean, it's the focus of every single thing.
Yeah.
I mean, especially in public education.
Yeah.
I mean, it's on overdrive.
Well, I would say everywhere. I mean, you look at it anywhere you look from every show they're redoing, they've now got to put a black person into it. And you're like, but I mean, Snow White was white.
I mean, you have public schools having, diversity, equity, inclusion officers on their payroll making, 6 figures. Like, what is the role of somebody in a public education, environment having a diversity, equity, inclusion officer? I know in Wentzville where my kids are, there's a big push for that right now. They're trying to have that person, that job carved out in administration in the cabinet in Wentzville. And we're all like, how is that going to benefit our kids academically?
It won't.
Like, really, we've been begging and saying, like, where are the studies that DEI, SEL, like, has improved academics?
There aren't any.
Crickets.
Yeah, there's none. It doesn't. The school district I'm in, they've actually gone from having about 6 of those down to 1, and the academics have continued to be better now.
See?
The more they get away from it, the better the academics get.
It blows my mind how far off of academic instruction these public schools have become.
Yeah. We just want them to teach science, math, basic principles that guide you. And what's fun is when they just do that, kids really do well.
Yeah.
Have sports, have an outlet.
Right. It's mental. There's a big mental health drive too in public education right now where they feel like we need to provide mental health services to these kids. And parents and out and where I am are like, we're sending our kids to be educated, not counseling sessions.
I think that, it's interesting to me because I listen to a lot of people talk about mental health and
it's important, don't get me wrong. I'm not dogging mental health.
But I think that it's flipped the script. Okay.
Yeah.
What I mean by that, it's like, we used to spank kids.
Right.
And now we're afraid to spank kids, but we need to spank kids because there were some who were abused. And so because of the few that got abused, we now have taken it away from a normal instrument in society. And because we've taken it away from normal instrument in society, we now have unruly people who would normally not be unruly because they would be disciplined. The Bible says, do not spare the rod. And there's a reason. It's not saying to beat the kid. There's nothing in the Bible that says beat a kid to a pulp or do anything like that. But the Bible says you should have strict discipline and discipline them. And our schools have gotten away from traditional discipline and dealing with people. And so because of that, are we shocked that they're become more unruly and more?
No, discipline is off the charts.
Yeah, they don't respect authority. When I was growing up, we respected, even if you disagreed with your teacher, you respected them. You could take it back to your mom and dad, and the mom and dad, when they spoke to a teacher, had authority. Right. Now they laugh at parents. How many times has an administrator laughed and said, "Well, just try to get me fired," or whatever. School boards. We've had full-on parents go to school board meetings, and it's like no big deal. Mm-hmm. There was a time where they would be very concerned about the community and what the community was saying on something like that. Yeah,
there is no parent education partnership right now. I feel like it's a war between parents and education. I do. And it's unfortunate. And I hear from the good teachers that are like, discipline is a huge problem. Like my kids, there's always a disruption. Kids cannot learn this way. And then, we bring it to our school boards and we say, can you guys please change your discipline policy? Can you follow your discipline policy? And they don't, and it's just like this cycle of being.
You feel like it's like the southern border where we actually got laws in place and they don't enforce them?
I mean, shocker, right?
What I know you've been doing a lot of things behind the scenes. What things are you most involved in right now, or what are some of the things that you're excited about seeing going on? I know you talked about the House and the bill yesterday. What are some of the things that you're trying to get passed, or maybe working with the House to do? I know you're doing some of that. And also, what are you currently doing in the school district where your kids go? What are some of the main things that right now you're really clued in on?
Yeah, so my big thing is education reform. We need to see some changes in public education when it comes to discipline, when it comes to academics, when it comes to the things that we're paying for, when it comes to what the state, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, DESE, what they say has to be taught to our kids. A lot of it is non-academic, SEL, DEI, trauma-informed things. And we're trying to say, look, the legislature in Missouri, year after year, gives DESE more power and control over our local schools.
I was going to ask you about DESE. I'm not a big fan of DESE, and they seem to be recycled administrators who normally should be retired, but now they've got a second life to do stuff, and they just don't even really care what they're doing as long as it feeds the agenda of somebody.
They, when you look at the education budget in the state of Missouri, DESE gets billions of dollars, and they have close to 2,000 employees, and they have all of this control. They're not elected. They have all this control over education in the state of Missouri. And so there's a House or a Senate bill up right now. I think it's 814, Jill Carter, trying to make that break for local school districts to break from DESE if they want to break from DESE, and to give more local control to the local school districts so that they're not under the DESE boot to teach our kids 20% of the time, teach them, SEL, DEI, and, this trauma-informed initiative where every kid is a victim of trauma, and you have to, it's a whole rabbit hole, but, one of the big things in ed reform, all the ed reformers will tell you is, we've got to get DESE under control. And we go to our legislature.
We need DESE?
It's in our Constitution. It is required. We are required to have DESE. We're not required to fund them. So we're let's defund them. Let's have some legislation where we can separate. And then that way...
But we could pass new legislation that takes it away. I mean, even if they're in the Constitution, our Constitution for the state has ways to amend it and remove it. There are things, that have been in the state constitution that were applicable at their time but are no longer applicable in today's time. Has anybody talked about just removing DESE?
Yeah, Senator Bill Eigel really wants to do something about them. I mean, here's what we hear. We hear from our Missouri legislature, we got to do something about DESE. We got to do something about DESE. But then year after year, they give them more power in this bill or that bill or this bill or that bill. And it's extremely frustrating because we're telling them this is the cancer in public education in Missouri, and we're just feeding it. We're feeding it year after year after year. So I don't know, besides the bill that I just mentioned, Senate Bill 814 by Jill Carter, I haven't seen any other bills that would do what we've been asking them to do. So that's a bill of focus for the ed reformers in Missouri right now, is that one. I used to be really involved in the school choice fight. I've kind of distanced myself from that because I feel like it's really been infiltrated and hijacked. And in a lot of the school choice bills last year and even the year before, they would categorize it as a school choice bill, but then they would slip DESE in there, or they would slip like the funding mechanism would require parents to jump through a bunch of hoops to get the money or the tax credit. And so I've kind of distanced myself from that particular area of ed reform just because I don't like what's happened to it. And they put a lot of things under the school choice umbrella that I just think are not school choice, like a charter school. A charter school is just another government school, another public school. I mean, it's categorized as a public school, except they don't have elected school boards, right? They don't have the taxpayer input. It's our tax money that funds these charter schools, but they take away the accountability piece for taxpayers and parents. And so I think that's no choice at all. I don't think you can say a charter school is a choice. It's a false choice. It's just more of the same public school. So, I've kind of been focused more on ed reform at the local level, like with your local school boards, and just kind of trying to rein in DESE. So that's been my area of focus the last couple of months.
Have you thought about running for a school board?
I've thought about it. I have. I've been involved in the last probably 3 elections pretty heavily. I've thought about it. I have a 1-year-old, so she's really, she's small and little, and I feel like my attention and my duties need to belong to her right now. But yeah, I've thought about it. It may happen one day.
Yeah, I could see you doing that.
Yeah.
Like that would be awesome. And but I'm the same way. I wouldn't. I can't. I don't have the time to run for a school board. But what I do is I try to find conservatives with great values, and I want them to still be open to hearing other people's opinions, not just my own. I think that's important too. Sometimes we kind of get in our own echo chambers, right? So.
Sure.
And we always need to be open to listen to the other side, but I think that it's important to find people that have similar values and that are education focused on the core values.
Yeah, and I mean, if you flip a school board, like there's a school board in my county, Francis House School Board, they've completely flipped their school board. They have made some amazing changes in curriculum, in funding, and just things that school has done. And I mean, academically, they're kicking everybody's butt. You know what I mean? Like they're bringing the focus back to academics versus all of this other social justice nonsense. And so I think they're the perfect poster child for how much a school board matters because of the things that they've been able to accomplish by having, the majority of conservatives on their board.
One of the things I found, and maybe you find this with your school board, but with our school board, one of the things that's been, I noticed when I look at budget is that the administrative budget continues to grow off the charts compared to teachers. So I hear teachers go, well, we need more raises. And I'm always like, why don't you guys tell your school to get rid of the administrators? If you just did that, we could have more busing. We could have so much more.
Crazy. I mean, like, I think in Wentzville, my district, I think like the annual budget for administration is $3.5 million or something absurd like that. And our bus drivers are making like $20 an hour. We have a huge school bus crisis, right? Where like transportation kids aren't even getting picked up. Buses are 45 minutes late, whatever. But then you have our superintendent making $250,000 a year, And
Same here. I'm like,
yeah, we have half the kids proficient in the core subjects, and you're making $250,000 a year. Tell me what other industry that would be like acceptable? None, zero, except government. But you know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah.
Can you imagine the stakeholders of some big corporation and the CFO is like, yeah, well, half our product doesn't work. Like, would he be employed still? No, he would not. It's outrageous to me.
Yeah, I was curious if that was the same with yours because I pay attention to that on ours, and I'm always like, when I hear these school board, fundraisers, we need to pass this, and I'm always like, we got to have this bond. I always reach out and tell my friends, I'm like, I won't vote for it anymore.
Yeah.
I won't vote until I see those administrative things come down because every time we give more money, all they do is get more administrators, and most of those administrators are people like DEI and things like that I don't agree with. I don't want more administrators. I want better schools. I want better.
Yeah, and people, the left will cry, well, it's a funding problem. It's a funding problem. It's an absolute spending problem. Like the priorities are so askew in public education on where the money should go that it's beat your head against the wall.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
100%. These people make decisions, and most of them don't understand Finance 101. Most of them have never ran a corporation, let alone, and so then now we give them government money. We give them your money.
Give them our money.
To spend, and they've never
spend other people's money in it.
So I'm going to tell you a funny story. This is where I had to wake up in public education. I work with a bunch of financial advisors that help educators retire. Okay. All right. I had, the lady was a assistant superintendent. Okay. And mind you, this is early 2000s. So, maybe 2005, 6, 7-ish right in there. Okay. And her husband was a coach and a teacher. So, and they had one child who was already in college. Okay. And he had full ride scholarship. So they come to me and they're both wanting to retire. I look at their income. Their combined income in that year was like $325,000. Okay. I mean, it was insane.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm looking at it going, okay, well, between your coaching, you get paid $78,000 as an educator, another 30 grand as a coach. You're making 105. You're making $67,000 as a assistant superintendent. And then she had something else she did for the state. So she got extra like 15,000 for that. So I'm like, you're making like 180.
Yeah.
You guys are doing really, really well. Right. So, and I look and it's a true story. Okay. Maxed out Abercrombie and Fitch card. Maxed out Abercrombie and Fitch card. Maxed out Macy's card. Maxed out Macy's card. Maxed out
spending money like the government.
So I'm looking at all this, right? I'm not lying. I'm going down. I'm looking at all of this, and I'm like, they had probably. And I'm in a home loan business, so I deal with a lot of credit issues. Okay, so I'm used to that. But I'd never seen credit card amount of debt of over 150 grand.
Oh my.
And almost all of it wasn't Amex or MasterCards. It was retail outlets like Sears, JCPenney's, Macy's, Abercrombie and Fitch.
Wow.
Okay. Next thing I noticed, they have 4 leased cars.
Oh, wow.
Okay. 2 drivers, son's gone. He's got his own car. That's paid off. He's doing his thing, right?
Yeah.
He's pretty much on his own. I think he was a senior in college or whatever. So he was pretty much on his own. Okay. So these 2 are driving 4 cars. And they're wanting to retire and they want to pay down some of his debt. And I go, well, I got this plan. If we get rid of this lease and we get rid of this lease and you guys just go down to 1 car each and versus these 4 cars. And we do this and we do that, we can knock this out in 2 years, and in 2 years from now, you can retire. I'll never forget this woman and her husband look across and she goes, I will not give up my weekend car. And we are not going to stop. Yeah, true story. And I am not going to stop buying myself clothes when I work so hard.
Wow. Okay, well.
I looked at her and said, well, I got no solutions for you. I can't pull money out of the back pocket. And,
I mean, that's the microcosm of government spending and education, isn't it?
That was such a wake-up call. I was probably about 28, 29 at the time, or maybe 30. But I was all of a sudden I looked. And in a short period of time afterwards, okay, another superintendent came.
Really?
Okay. Both him and his wife were superintendents.
Oh, so they're making great money.
Yes. 2 superintendents in the St. Louis area married. Okay. And I look at them and they have no money again. And I'm looking and I'm going, how do these people have no money? Well, he would take his buddies on golf trips every other month to these elite golf courses and cover the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
That's what the backstory was. So I found out the reason why they had no money, because they didn't have a ton of credit card debt, but I'm like, you have no money. What am I missing here? Like, I see 400,000 coming in.
Yeah.
I'm seeing low credit card debt.
Yeah.
A house payment that's affordable. What?
Yeah.
Like, what am I missing? He would go on these extravagant golf trips every few months and just blow 20 grand on a weekend or 30 grand on a 4-day golf trip for him and his buddies.
That's insane.
And so he was blowing over 150 grand a year on golf trips.
150 grand a year. Well, like an example of overspending in Wentzville, parents have been over and over again going to our school board, please focus on academics. Can you please focus on academics? Can we get some learning loss through COVID? Can we, do this, do that? And their answer to us was a $2 million program called Leader in Me, which is a social emotional learning program. And we're like, did we talk to the wall? Apparently we were talking to the wall when we were asking you to address academics because you just spent $2 billion of our money on this program that we said, please stop. And it's like, they don't care. There's no accountability whatsoever. So that's why school board are important, because I'll tell you, that school gets 73% of my real estate taxes every year. If you look at your real estate taxes, all of it goes to the school, almost all of it. Anybody, all across the state, right? Like,
I agree. That was my point of these superintendents.
$100 a month goes to your school district, people.
Well, I had, in that conversation, I had 3 major superintendents in the St. Louis area.
That's crazy.
And not one of them had their budgets. And I've done probably half of the retired superintendents in the St. Louis area. And I can only say maybe 1 or 2.
That's interesting.
Financially,
that's a really interesting story.
Oh,
I mean, really, that's really interesting because.
And we put them in charge of a school district. Yeah. And they can't even budget their own households.
Yeah.
And yet we put them in charge of millions and millions. So I don't, my initial thought of anybody in education and upper echelon in my mind is this person's never had real world experience and they have no idea what they're doing. I mean, I know it probably sounds bad, and it's a generalization, but that's my immediate thought until you prove me otherwise, because that's been my experience. I've now helped so many educators retire, upper principals and superintendents. I cannot think of somebody being financially astute. And then I go, and just like you said, they take the vast majority of my property tax every year goes to them.
It's insane. When I started doing the deep dive of like how much money these people have, they have like a $300 million a year budget of taxpayer money to work with, and it's like, if people would look at their tax bill, if they didn't just have it taken out with their house payment, and they realized, wow, I'm giving $300 a month to the Wentzville School District, and half the kids there aren't proficient in the core subjects. Like, what am I getting for my money? Like, what am I getting? And I think if people could see like every month and had to write a check to the school district for a couple $100s, you think they would pay attention? I don't know. Do you think?
I don't know. I go back and say, I talk to people all the time who will be in the school district, and I'll say, hey, help, I need you to vote for this person in the school board. And they'll be like, but I don't have kids in there. And I'm like, yeah, but you pay.
I mean, you pay a lot.
You're paying. You live in the school district. You're writing a check every year to these people. You should be voting. You realize that school board elections are one of the least voted in.
Oh man, it's terrible. Like 12% is a good turnout. Oh man.
Yeah, and all these people are writing checks.
Yeah.
And so I don't understand it. The more I've gotten involved, the more I'm just like, this is nuts. People need to get involved. They need to. You may not have a kid in the school district. You may even homeschool. I even get that with homeschoolers. They're like, we homeschool. And I'm like, yeah, but you're still writing a check to my school district. You should be voting in this.
And like, it's your home value too, right? Because like people aren't going to want to move to a place where the schools are trash. So like it affects your property values too, like the way that a school district is managed and how the kids are doing. And, I mean, would you agree with that?
100%. Yeah. The other thing I find very interesting, I always hear about pastors saying, I want to be involved in the community. And my first question now back to him is, have you been to a school board meeting?
That's awesome. Thank you for doing that.
And I'm like,
great question.
If you're telling me you want to be involved in the community, the most local thing you can be is at a school board meeting. They're like, well, I don't want to be political. I said, and I look at them and go, the church is political.
Yeah.
The church is political. Man, what do you mean? You're
preach because
you're holding a truth. You're holding a Bible, and that's truth.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand that the rest of the world doesn't see your truth, okay, and they'll be like, well, the separation of church and state, and I just go, that is the biggest bunch of baloney I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
Okay, you obviously have never spent time reading anything by the real founding fathers, because they all agreed that the Bible and its principles, regardless if they were a real strong believer or not, they all regarded the Bible as the absolute, essential part of the truth. Every great civilization, if you study world history and you have any kind of really good history, you'll understand that any great civilization that has done good things has always had basic principles that follow the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not kill, steal, destroy. These should be universal truths, right?
Right.
And now we got people who can't even figure out who a man and a woman are.
Right.
And it's like, what?
And they're teaching that to our kids. Like my husband and I are like, if you can't teach truth to children, then what else matters? I mean, like,
I think there's an interesting thing. I've done a lot of research on a little bit of this, and I think this is going to be a little controversial, but it'll be fun. All right, we'll go down this rabbit hole. How about that? You like a rabbit hole?
Go.
All right. So what I find interesting is in the late 90s, you had a couple of fallen African-American leaders that were part of the Civil Rights Union movement, okay? So you had Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, right? Al Sharpton was found to be a fraud because of the whole L.A. riot thing and all the grifting he did, and then he has an affair, and then Jesse Jackson has an affair, okay? Now, fast forward, early 2000s. Okay, by this point now, you're close in age. When you were growing up, did they mention that they were out looking for the gay gene?
Oh man, see, I was a private school kid.
Okay, so when I was growing up in public school, the one thing they kept saying is we may find that we think kids that there's this homosexual gene that they're going to find, and so the science was that they were trying to find the DNA or the gene that triggered homosexuality, and that it was ingrained in them. Okay, well, by late 90s, we had now knew every gene. And we had broken down almost everything DNA wise, and now we knew there's no gay gene or no gay DNA that happens, right? So other than the anomalies that we could discuss, but in general, there's not a gay gene in gay people. Okay, so that said, that kind of killed the science of that. And so you don't really hear late 90s, early 2000s, other than some sitcoms that were funny.
Yeah.
You don't see a ton of, homosexuality. Obviously, you had the don't ask, don't tell thing going on, but there wasn't a major push.
Oh, yeah. It is on hyperdrive.
Well, so by about 2003, 4, and 5, okay, we're in the middle of the Iraqi war, and I think social media starting to come about. All of a sudden, Jesse Jackson shows up. Do you know what his coalition was called?
What's that?
The Rainbow Coalition.
Oh.
Hijacking the Rainbow. Okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, Al Sharpton, all right? And obviously has this now primetime show on MSNBC. Those two show back up, and now they've got their new civil rights agenda, and that new agenda was homosexuality. Before then, we never said that gay was being like black. Okay. Today, if you question somebody being gay or homosexual, it's like you're attacking their skin.
Yeah.
Well, it's like you're attacking their skin color. You mentioned homophobe, but it's almost like you're racist.
Yeah.
People look at being gay in the same light as a color. That did not happen until then. But now you have two civil rights leaders who led a great cause but had fallen. Unfortunately, good people fall. We saw that in the Bible, right? David was a great leader, and then he does a bad thing. So it happens, okay? But instead of coming back and admitting their fault and doing being humble like David, these guys come back and now they've got a new way to stay in and keep their
base angry and mad and upset and engaged.
Right. Because civil rights, as we were just saying, by early 2000s, people weren't rap music and things were good racially. We weren't really. I mean, there were some little bits, but for the most part, as a country, we were. As far as society, about as good as you could possibly get dealing with race relations, right? And which gave Obama the opportunity to run as a president. And so, but you saw these guys kind of coming in there, and all of a sudden that became their new cause. And by 2010, 2015, now homosexuality is now being identified as the same as a color, as somebody's ethnicity.
Protected class.
Protected class, absolutely. And so it's very interesting. Of course, now that's progressed into more and more and more. But in my studies, that's kind of what I see. And I just go, wow, that... if we just broke it down, and it just shows, but see, once you start to blur the line on science,
right?
That was to me like the first blurred line.
Yeah.
And now we're all the way to the fact that now we can't identify men or women. We have things we call people it's, theys, and them, and I don't know. I mean, there's
a lot that I've never even heard of.
Yeah.
How confusing for our kids.
Well, not even confusing. I look at it as they know the truth. I mean,
the parental,
they'll probably, the vast majority of them know the truth. But what I think is going on is how much are they now discrediting these people?
Yeah.
Okay. Like I always tell people, like, once you start getting, and they'll say red pilled. I don't like to call it red pill because there's a lot of people. Joe Rogan's not red pilled. Elon Musk is not red pilled. Okay, they just have opened their eyes to truth and realize that seeing it. You listen to Joe Rogan, even like a couple years ago, and he was still trying to give some credit. Even when they did the horse dewormer, he invited the guy on the show, and their major doctor, and And he was still trying to give CNN cred. Today, he gives none of them. He's like, one of my shows outsells their whole week. Mm-hmm. They're not mainstream media anymore. Mm-hmm. Nobody goes to CNN for news except for a very select few. Mm-hmm. Nobody goes to MSNBC. Nobody even goes to Fox. Fox's viewership's been crashing. Why? Ever since they got rid of Tucker, and we all know what it was about.
Yeah,
that their ratings have dropped. So I think what you've seen is as people start to look and you start to question truth, then you go, that's no longer a source I can believe. Mm-hmm. You know, lie to me once, shame on me. Lie to me twice. But how many times do these authorities lie to these people that they eventually go,
right?
This is...
Yeah.
What I wonder is what's going to happen as this generation does it. Is there going to be a change? I think we're seeing some of that. Right now, we were talking earlier about the change going on in the federal and local level and Republicans, right? I mean, you probably 20 years ago thought Bush was good.
You're right. And now I'm like, nah.
Me and my friend were talking about the other day. We both voted for Bush.
Yeah.
You know, like we thought he was a great president, right? And then I felt bad for him when the media picked him apart towards the end. Mm-hmm. I look back now and I look, oh my goodness, why? A, truth.
Yeah.
Right? B, I think there's been a cleansing going on, and we're starting to realize that there's this deep state. You want to call it what you want. Some people call it deep states and neocons. I've heard all sorts of different words and definitions. At the end of the day, there are a group of people who we have kind of a couple things going on. We got unelected bureaucrats, and then we got a group that profits off of certain actions of this country, and therefore they have a vested interest to make sure those things continue on. All right. So with COVID and this thing, right now, if you're paying attention to any of these medical companies, they're all crashing right now. Right. I mean, Pfizer's.
I mean, think of how many people that I know now that are like, I will never give my child another vaccine ever.
Yeah.
I mean, like on vaccines alone, they're probably losing billions of dollars because people don't trust them because they were untruthful.
That's why, and so the scares, then they go to the other side and they get rid of anything that makes sense. And so that's the truth is, the vaccines, some vaccines have a place, but I also think it's interesting that we have not, as a society, sat back and looked at some of these better. Mm-hmm. Some people would call Kennedy a kook, but I think there's some truth in some of this stuff.
I agree
with dealing with vaccines, and I think people should listen to what he has to say and consider it. Obviously, do research. At the end of the day, there's never been a time where you can get more information at your fingertips and learn and become more engaged than before. I mean, you're living proof of that, right?
Yeah.
How much have you learned about school boards and local elections?
I wish I could not know some of it because it's so bad. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it like even if you just look at education as a whole, I mean, I just describe it as an onion. There's so much. It is so deep state in some areas that you're never going to know all that there is to know about it. And I mean, it's awful.
So, what would you recommend if people are listening in and they want to start to get involved? What are the first steps that you would recommend somebody getting involved in?
Yeah, go to a school board meeting. Just observe. Just sit there and learn what you can learn. Just kind of look at what the structure of public education is and how it goes down, and get involved in a local parent group or a local community group that is trying to change it. Social media is full of those.
Right.
And it's a really great way. Everybody's got, the thing that they're passionate about. So somebody might really know a lot about school finance. Somebody might know a lot about school curriculum. Somebody might, have a real talent for, finding something to do with athletics or whatever. But there's so many hands in education that I think it's impossible for one person to know it all. So don't be discouraged on thinking you need to know everything at the beginning. But I mean, getting involved, that's important. And educating yourself on education is so important. It's so important for your own kids, your own community, the future. It's just something that we really have to start watching, because we are graduating kids that don't even know how to read. We are graduating kids that cannot count money back to you at a drive-through. I mean, we are graduating the future completely unequipped for the world and life.
But they can tell people about non-gender binary stuff.
It's so much feelings over facts right now. It's just we're just doing our kids an incredible disservice right now because the focus is not on learning academics. It's on learning.
I feel like we're setting them up to fail.
Oh, absolutely.
Not only fail, but fail at the world stage, because all we're doing is setting up people. Eventually, if we put out enough of these people who have no backbone and all they are is, keyboard warriors, China, those people, they're gonna absolutely eat them for lunch. And we already see that they're not very scared of this administration, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're in 2 wars, possibly 3 going on right now. I mean, it's the world sniffs weakness.
Yeah. And I mean, what better way to flip the next generation and make them weak than to just leave them uneducated and stupid, And I mean, like, it breaks my heart, the kind of failures that we are presenting to these kids when they deserve so much more. And it's just, there's just such a deviation from academics into all kinds of social justice programs. It's just, like, does social justice pay the bills, Yeah.
Well, and what happens what's the measuring mark? I always ask them when we're done with that. And they're like, well, we're never done. I'm like, well, what do you mean?
Like, how do you know it's working?
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's a great question. That's what we've been asking as parents in Wentzville is, where's the data that shows that this makes a student better at math or, whatever. And they don't have it. They don't have it because I think, and so another thing we're thinking is, maybe because we're failing so bad academically right now as a state with education that they feel like they have to move the goalposts and focus it on something else. I don't know. I don't know. But like, you have half of Missouri kids not proficient in the core subjects. I mean, it's crisis level. This is not acceptable.
And you don't find that in Japan?
No.
You're not finding that in China?
Mm-mm. And then you look at how much money it takes to educate, and I say it in quotes, a child. Like in Wentzville, it's $12,000 per year in taxpayer money to educate a child in public school. Like Francis Howell, it's like $13,000 almost. And some of these inner city schools, like St. Louis City, $18,000 a year in taxpayer money. They have 80% of their kids not proficient in math.
Yeah, and then you look at like
that's criminal.
Yeah, you look at like dollar for dollar spending in other countries and adjust it for things, and you'll find like countries like Japan are doing it for a fraction of the cost.
Exactly.
Like, how do they do this at a fraction of the cost? Yeah, maybe we have a few extracurricular sports or whatever, but it can't be right. You can't have the spectrum. There's just no accountability because, again, I go back and say I was shocked when I started seeing how many of these superintendents couldn't control their own budgets. And then I started realizing over time, my mind started playing all these different educators that I was doing. I'm like, most of these people have no idea about Finance 101, and yet we put our kids in, they're in charge of our kids. They're taking care of the budgets. They're spending money. It's no wonder. We should probably have a finance class, just 101 for people in administrative positions in school districts.
I mean, or even for our kids, like some of the life skill things that they're just not learning now. I don't know. It worries me. It worries me as a mom. It worries me for, and being part of my community. What kind of student are we graduating? How equipped will they be? I don't know. It's crisis level though. Like, I just encourage listeners to, it's time to get involved. It's past time. Like, we're playing catch up now. It's not just stopping and the bleeding. Like, we need to repair,
Absolutely. I agree. I think that people should start, the steps I always tell people is go to school board meetings, start listening in, get to know your local representatives.
Yeah. Get to know your school board members.
Get to know your school board members. All those people will help. You see changes that need to be done from a school board level, let them know. And you see changes that need to happen from a state level, let them know. Make sure you're getting involved in electing local officials that represent your values and who you are. Because a lot of people don't even pay attention to state level stuff.
They really don't.
That my party says put that person, or you look at the names, you're like, there's 3 Republicans running in this primary. I'm just going to choose this one because Tom sounds good.
I saw more signs for this person than the other, and it's like, you really need to pay attention.
Character matters. Find out character, find out conviction. And we've been very blessed in my area to have Justin Sparks as our local representative.
Great,
yeah. And one of the things you said is you don't have to be an expert at everything.
Yeah.
And to get involved in those groups, my wife is involved in a lot of those groups. My wife has her little thing. Yeah, that she does. And the other thing I would say about not being an expert is there's that is not only okay, but find your niche.
Yeah.
Find where you can plug into in those groups and be effective. It could be the best, promoter at the next school election, finding the conservative that represents your values and then going door to door, using the apps and handing out flyers and mentioning who to vote for.
Yeah.
Go around your church.
Yeah.
In your areas of influence, whether it be a gym.
Let me ask you this question. Do you think the church needs to get more involved in politics?
100%.
I'm so kind of bummed out.
I think churches should be inviting all the local politicians into their churches to speak to their congregates, and then afterwards, be able to, after they've been there and they leave, come out to the congregates and say, we listen to this guy, and it can be both from both parties. I'm not even saying they should. It used to be that they were public forums, right, for voting and all. So I think they should invite them in, get back to the old days of inviting them in, listening to what they have to say. And then critiquing them. Guys, we listen to this guy. He's not pro-life. He's not this. He's not that. His party has a basis of this. We just don't feel comfortable supporting that. This person, like school boards are not supposed to be necessarily
partisan.
We know they are. Yeah. Okay, everybody has a bias.
Say, education shouldn't be political. Okay, well, tell everybody else that, please, because it's so political.
Yeah.
Like, you can't really say that with a straight face. Education's not political.
That's like when somebody goes to me and say, God shouldn't be in schools, right? And I go and look at them and say, God's always been in school. What do you mean? What God are you talking about? Well, like the Bible. Oh, yeah, because we made man God. I mean, I walk down school districts all the time and I see everything that's humanistic that can be possibly made. You can do it. You can be your own thing.
Yeah.
We tell people that are 5'2", 360 pounds, they could be the next LeBron James, and they're 17 years old and never will. They have no chance.
Shame.
Yeah, I mean... we're so worried about the fictionary stuff that we can't be truthful, and so that they answer that question. I absolutely believe that the church should be involved. I think they should be involved in school politics, definitely local politics. And I don't think it's bad for them to mention stuff on the federal level. I agree. To say like, hey, we're not voting for Jesus. I hear people all the time. I have conservative friends. Well, Trump is, and I'm like, look, I can go over his flaws. He says things that I disagree with. Yeah. I say, one of the things I have a big problem with him on right now is that he's never apologized for all of his vaccine stuff. That was a terrible policy. Yeah. And the fact that he was bragging about it even after we all knew it was terrible bothered me. I would love for him to come out and say, I was wrong. That was, he won't ever do it because he's so cocky and full of himself. And that's another.
You're right. That's one of the main issues with him too.
That really bothered me that he allowed the Faucis to take over and dictate policy.
Warp speed and all that stuff.
Absolutely. We need to take care of all that stuff. That should never be done again. Yeah. And so therefore, I have a hard... So I'm not the biggest Trump guy when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I go, you know what? If I have to compare him to who? Biden? Yeah. Let's look at him. Okay. Who?
So sad that we have to.
Yeah. Well, you're not going to vote for Jesus. I tell him I'm never voting for Jesus. And I said, that's why I'm engaged in the primaries. When Trump was running the first time, I have no problem saying this. Anybody that knew me back in 2016, when Trump won, I was actually a big Ben Carson fan.
Yeah, I was a huge Ben Carson fan.
I really wanted Ben Carson to win. Coming out of Obama, I thought he would be great for race relations. I loved the way he spoke, but I also knew it was a long shot because he also was so soft-spoken. He's not a... Yeah, in your face kind of... Yeah. Right, and so I didn't know how the media would treat him. They typically eat people like that for lunch, but I really liked him. So that said, that's why I get involved in primaries. You get to choose those guys, and then when they whittle down, you got to take a look and look at the character, look at the record.
Their voting record is really important.
Yep, and see who, and then try to influence the guy that you're going to back. That doesn't, just because they've stood by those things. People change all the time, right?
Especially once elected. Isn't that weird?
Well, once elected, but even before so, because sometimes they just don't know. Yeah, they vote with what they think. I'll give you a great example. Recently, if you've been paying attention to politics, up in New Hampshire, Hampshire. I get in trouble. Hampshire wife who's listening. So the up there though, Vivek Ramaswamy had a great discussion with Trump right after he conceded. And the next day, Trump came out and talked about cryptocurrency and government overreach and all that kind of stuff. And everybody was cheering, and he kind of stopped and he goes, "Oh, you know what I'm talking about." He didn't understand how big of a concern this was to conservatives.
Yeah.
Moving towards the one currency and having the government in control of all this different flow.
Yeah.
And so you kind of look at him, he's kind of like shocked to see all that. And I just go, often, like in my ministry, I'm in the housing industry with loans and financing. Often they go to financial advisors and they have a financial advisor who's in the business and they think that financial advising is the same as doing home loans. And so they ask those guys.
Yeah.
And those guys are like, yeah, this is what you should do. They don't understand a lick of what we do.
Right.
Okay, that's like asking an engineer about a mechanic's job. Yeah, they're in the same realm of things, but my mechanic friends have always said engineers come up with the concepts, and but 90% of them fail. And there's a reason. I mean, things can look great mathematically, but when you actually go to make it and create it, what mathematically should make sense doesn't always make sense. On cars, and they'll be like, this should be a good safety feature, and then we find out that there's a recall because it wasn't designed right. There was a design flaw. Okay, that nobody ever thought that you would get sideswiped at this corner and that it would cause this pressure delay. Okay, because
that's how I feel with school choice. Like in theory, it sounds awesome, but like at implementation, y'all screwed it up big time.
Yeah.
It's just like read the room, like know what's going to work and what's not. And I'm sorry to interrupt.
You're fine. No, I agree. When you think school choice, you think it should be like a free market for school. You can move and take your kid or somewhere else.
Your money. Yeah.
Especially if your school district isn't performing.
Yeah. But it's not the school choice, according to politicians and even Republicans, that's not the definition of school choice for them. They still want the control from the state in that decision making, and that's just no choice at all, in my opinion.
Well, we need to fight back on that. We need to get local representatives who fight for values and change that definition. Yeah. Okay. Who say school choice is exactly that. School choice. We're going to allow parents to have the opportunity to opt out, take 80% of their tax dollars with them and apply it somewhere else. And we will support that, understanding that it isn't about public education, it's about education. Yeah. And like parents are the expert on their own children. It's not the state, it's not the education establishment. Parents know what's best for their kids. And, the fact that they're trying to shove charters down our throat and say, well, charters are it's a choice. I mean, charter is public school without taxation, without the taxpayers' representation on a school board. So, it's just been, school choice has been really hijacked. I just caution people out there, as someone who has been a huge school choice advocate for a while, they've completely taken it over and changed some of the definitions. And so just be really careful when you support school choice legislation to read all the details. All right. Anything else that we haven't covered? We've gone over so much. We kind of went on some tangents and had some fun. But is there anything else that we haven't hit that you feel like we should hit before we? No, I encourage people to get involved because it's a really important issue and it's not going to change unless you get out there and make a change. Yeah. If you're listening in and you want your church to get involved, I would recommend, if you haven't already checked out TPUSA, Charlie Kirk and his group are activated now. We got several local churches who are already trying to train other churches, so check into them. Highly recommend. You're in the state of Missouri. You want to check out what's going on from a state level. You don't have time to do all that. Jodi Grace Ministries, you can check out her podcast. Highly recommend that you check that out, and I'll even put in the links of this episode so you guys can do so. Check it out. She puts out a lot of good information on what's going on at our Jeff City State Capitol. I love Jodi. She's great. Yeah, me too. We've been blessed to have her on here. Hopefully we'll get her back on. Yeah. And then if somebody's out in Wentzville, what's the best way to reach you? Oh, gosh. I guess find me on Facebook or social media. Lindi Williford, LindiWilliford. Okay, we'll find a way. We'll put a link of one of hers out there for you guys, so you can reach out to her if you're wanting to find out. A, maybe you want to get engaged like her in your school district area, and you're just wanting to run some stuff by. But B, maybe you live out in Wentzville and you're involved, and again, you want to know more information. You want to maybe get involved in maybe a different way. Find one of these groups that you can plug into that are on the social media places, whether it be Facebook or Twitter or whatever. We'll make sure you can reach out to her and connect one way or the other. An email or something, but we'll make sure we get something there in the links for the episode. That way you guys can connect. And I really thank you for being here. Thank you for getting involved. Like we're the same way. We were, as I said before, I was a little involved, but not to the near level that I got. Once COVID hit, we started having the masking, the push for vaccinations and,
messing with our babies.
well, and quite honestly, society, I was going to a gym and I'm thinking I'm doing one of the most healthiest things and they want you to wear a mask and I'm thinking this can't be good. I'm blacking out after 20, 30 minutes of chugging it really hard on I'm doing this cardio and I'm going, I know this can't be doing my brain well for me to almost pass out twice a day at the gym. I don't, and I'm trying to find the most I got one of those plastic ones that you could put around. It was almost like a shield, so I wouldn't have to breathe.
Yeah.
So hard.
Breath, yeah.
Yeah, and it was only slightly better, and then you're trying to watch, because when I'm doing cardio, I go to the gym because I know I need to, and I do desire it to some degree, but the way I can do cardio is I put an iPad in front of me and I watch a video or a TV show or something. I'm watching something and it just distracts me. I find it funny. Sometimes if I'm talking to people, I can do okay, but it's not my strong suit. Typically, if I don't have anything, let's say my earbuds go dead that day for some reason in charge, or my iPad didn't charge, and man, it is excruciating to make it through a workout. I mean, it's just doing the cardio. So I just, I was struggling. And so you had the kid thing going on, you had that. And then you started seeing all these other insane policies that started following. You're going, what do you mean I can't be around old people?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean by...
Right.
And then, as I said before, they started dehumanizing common sense, good medications that have been around that have very little side effects that could have potentially helpful things. I'm thinking, you guys are trying all sorts of experimental stuff and you won't even try this because why?
Yeah.
Because there's no money in it.
Drug. Yeah.
So, all that said, hey, thanks for checking us out. Continue to like and subscribe. You can support our podcast for as little as $2 or $3, depending on which platform you're watching on. Some are $3 minimum. Some have $1.99 minimum. We do appreciate that. That does help us to bring in guests and then put out things and continue to do things because this does have a cost a little bit. That said, don't also forget to support those that support us, like Resource One and Andy McCallum and his team. We just had Danielle from that team on here recently on her great testimony. She was born underneath the One Child Act over in China.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and left on a playground like 8 days old. But adopted. Doing great over here. An amazing person with an amazing life. So... you can check out Andy and his team at Resource One at 636-458-1798. And if you like Danielle, call her instead. So ask for a Danielle, not Andy. How about that? He won't mind. And then there's Chris at CS Design. He did our intro or outro. You'll notice on this episode, we got our new intro we just did on the last episode. Hopefully you're enjoying that. Chris and his team did that. 573-436-3717 for any of your technology type needs. And then Jeff Earhart of State Farm Insurance for any of your insurance needs at 314-821-JEFF. That's 314-821-5333. Thanks again for checking us out, listening. Sorry for all that sponsorship stuff, but we appreciate them taking the time to help us out, and for that we want to make sure you guys know who is supporting good values and good things going on. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll get you back. If there's anything good on Lewinsville, make sure you show back up and let me know. We'll let the area know what's going on. And but with that, we'll catch you guys next time. God bless.
Thank you.
You're safe.